They gathered in my living room, whispering about what I owned, who would get the house, and how much cash was left in my accounts. I wasn't even gone yet, but to them, I might as well have been buried. My name is Thomas. I'm 61 years old, and this is the story of how my own blood treated me like I was already dead. They thought greed was their inheritance. What they didn't know was that I had one last performance in me, and it would be the lesson of their lives. Sit back and let me tell you how they thought I was gone, and how I made sure they paid for every ounce of their greed. Before we get too far, don't forget to subscribe, and let me know where you're listening from. It started small. It always does. A comment here, a look there. I had a health scare in January. Nothing dramatic. Just a spell where the room tilted and my hands felt like someone else's. The doctor told me to slow down, watch my salt, and stay off ladders. The news spread through the family faster than a rumor at a church picnic. By the next week, my son David was standing in my kitchen with a little notebook, asking about assets like he was doing me a favor. "Dad, it's just to be prepared," he said, already flipping to a page he'd labeled house in block letters. "You don't want chaos later." "Later," I said, "is not today." "I know," he said, smiling too quick, "but you know later has a way of sneaking up." My daughter Erin came by that same afternoon with a tape measure. She said she needed to size the dining table for new linens. I watched her move around the room with quiet focus, and I remembered her as a kid, counting the steps from the porch to the sidewalk for no reason except to know. She used to count for fun. Now she counted for value. My sister-in-law, Carla, visited with a covered dish and a voice that sounded like a prayer. She set the food down, touched my arm, and asked if I had everything in order. Then, like she'd been waiting for a cue, she drifted into my office and stood there a little too long, just long enough for her eyes to scan the shelves where the safe sits behind the row of old photo albums. She came back out smiling, empty-handed. People think you don't notice when they notice. The smallest things stung the most. A joke from David about how that painting could fetch something. Erin's text that read, "If you ever want to downsize the tools in the garage, I know someone who buys sets." My nephew Joe asking if he could hold on to the boat keys, just in case. I tried to ignore it. I cut bread, brewed tea, turned the TV up. But you can't drown out the sound of people counting in their heads. It has a rhythm. 1, 2, 1, 2, table chair, rug art, car boat, house, house, house. I spoke to my friend Alma one night. She's known me since I was 20. Back when I thought overtime hours made you immortal. She listened without interrupting, then said in that calm way she has, "They're acting like you've already left the room, Thomas. Maybe you need to leave the room on your own terms." "Leave it how?" I asked. "Enough that they see themselves," she said. "People get honest when they think the audience is gone." The idea lodged somewhere behind my ribs and sat there, sharp and patient. I slept on it. In the morning it was still there. I called my lawyer, Nora. "Tell me I can't do something," I said when she picked up. "You always start that way," she said, laughing. "What is it this time?" I told her the truth, every line. Not just what they said, but how they said it. The way the house sounded different when they were in it, because every door they opened had an invisible price tag in the air. I told her I wanted the counting to stop. I told her I wanted them to feel what it was like to stand at the edge of a life and hear other people divide it up. Then I told her the part Alma had let bloom in my head. "I want to stage a farewell," I said. "Not a trick for hustlers on the internet. I don't need a show. I need a mirror. I want to see what they do when they think I'm gone, and I want it recorded so I never have to argue about it again." Nora didn't answer right away. She has 3 modes: fast, faster, and silent. Silent means she's turning a heavy object around in her mind. "You're not trying to teach people how to do this, right?" she said at last. "You understand, we keep it clean, lawful, respectful. No fraud against the public, no false reports to authorities, no insurance nonsense. You are telling a story to your family, not the world at large." "I'm not trying to fool the government," I said. "I'm trying to stop my own children from pawning my life while I'm still breathing." "Then we do it carefully," she said. "Not fake death. A private memorial, a controlled announcement to your family. No obituary in the paper. Invitations through a third party, me or the funeral director, so you're not in the room. And before that, paper signed, Assets moved. Conditions set. Conditions, I said. Trusts, she said. You can keep things simple, Thomas. A living trust controls what happens to the house and the accounts. You can leave letters. You can require minimum decency. You're not punishing a moment. You're protecting the rest of your years. We met 2 days later in her office with the rain hitting the windows like impatient fingers. She slid forms across the desk, the kind that make ordinary people feel small. She explained them in plain language. We created a trust for the house with my name on it as trustee, and a successor trustee I could choose if I wanted less weight later. We earmarked funds for Aaron's kids, education, sealed and separate. We wrote a clause that said any person who harassed, pressured, or threatened me over assets would be cut out. We wrote another that said theft, yes, even borrowing, triggered the same result. We weren't writing revenge. We were writing boundaries. You're asking them to pass the simplest test, Nora said, tapping her pen on the page. Don't be cruel. Don't be greedy. Don't lie. That test used to be built in, I said. Sometimes you have to write it down. We called Alonzo at the memorial home, a man who can guide any conversation from chaos to quiet. He listened, then said, we can host a small private gathering. No public notice. A room with a door. A guest list that I control. If you want to observe, we'll arrange a side room with a camera feed. No theatrics. Dignity only. I don't want to humiliate them, I said, surprising myself as I said it. I want them to reveal themselves. If they choose well, I want it on record. If they choose poorly, I want it on record. Understood, he said. Do you want words spoken? Yes, I said. I'll write them. I stood up from that meeting, feeling taller and older at the same time. I drove home slow, let the wipers set the tempo. In the driveway, I sat with the engine off and the radio low. Rain has a way of scrubbing sound. I thought about my first hammer, my first paycheck, the first time I carried Erin on my shoulders, and she told me I was as big as a house. I wasn't ready to hand my house to anyone. I wasn't ready to hand my self-respect to a room where people were sharpening calculators. The next few weeks, I let life look normal. I baked bread on Sundays. I texted photos of the cat asleep on the windowsill. I watched a game with David and didn't flinch when he brought up timelines, a word that sounds harmless until it wraps itself around your living room. I took Erin to lunch and watched her count the chairs again, eyes tracking, mind dividing. I told her stories about her mother, stories that didn't include will readings or bank balances. She laughed until she cried, then dabbed her eyes and said, You always make things feel simple, Dad. I wish I could make people feel simple, I said. A week before the memorial, I called the locksmith and had every lock changed, not an act of suspicion, an act of self-respect. I left 2 sets of keys with Nora, one with Alma, and one in a small safe at the bank. I inventoried my tools and photographed each drawer, not because I expected theft, but because I wanted to know my own life better than anyone else did. Knowing is a shield. I also wrote letters. Not long ones, not sermons, just paper with ink that said what I had never said because I expected time to say it for me. I wrote to David, You are not a spreadsheet. You are a boy who used to bring me rocks because you thought they were treasure. Keep one. I taped a little stone to the bottom of the page. I wrote to Erin, You counted the steps to the porch because you wanted to be sure we'd always get there. We will. I wrote to myself, too. I put that one in my wallet. You are not a bank. You are a man. The day came quiet. Alonzo kept his word. No announcement in the paper. No black cars at my curb. Just a list of names sent out through Nora's office with a line that said, A private farewell for family and close friends. The room at the memorial home felt soft. Lamps instead of overhead lights, chairs that didn't squeak, a table with pitchers of water and small plates in case someone's hands needed something to do. Alonzo led me to a side room with a thick curtain and a screen. The camera fed was simple and clear. I sat alone. He set a box of tissues nearby like an old friend who knows that even a plan can get heavy. You don't have to watch everything, he said. I do, I said. They arrived in clusters. People never walk into rooms like that alone if they can help it. David came first, hair combed flat, jaw tight. Erin came 5 minutes later with Carla at her elbow, whispering. My nephew Joe followed, eyes bright with the thrill of an event. 2 cousins I hadn't seen in years came, offering looks of practiced sorrow to anyone who glanced their way. There were hugs at the door. I watched who lingered, who scanned. A memorial has a quiet math. You can tell who came to grieve and who came to confirm. Real grief sits. Greed circulates. Nora had asked if I wanted an open book for notes. I said no, I didn't want to catalog performances. I wanted the room to move without props. She'd placed a single framed photo on a small table near the front, the one of me covered in paint beside the shed I built the last summer Erin lived at home. I touched the screen when I saw it, wanting to smooth the corner like paper. Alonzo stepped up and welcomed them. His voice is the sound a room needs when it's thinking too loud. This is a private gathering, he said. Please respect the family's space. There will be a short reading. Afterward, you're welcome to share memories. He nodded to Nora, who stood with a folder. She did not read a will. She read my words. He wanted you to hear this, she said, and then my voice filled the room in a way it never had when I was actually inside it. Not from a speaker, that would have felt like a trick, but through her steadiness. He asked me to read it slowly. Thank you for loving me in the ways you did, she began. Thank you for enduring me in the ways you had to. If you are here to remember, remember the pure parts. If you are here to count, count your blessings instead. I had written it on a quiet night with a calm pen. No scolding, no hint. Just truth, set at a table where anyone could take a seat. Faces do small things when they run into a wall they didn't expect. David looked down, then up, then down again. Erin's eyes shone in a way that made me want to step out of the side room and hold her head in my hands and say, "It's okay to feel everything." Carla crossed her arms and then uncrossed them. Joe looked around to gauge the room before deciding which shape to take. After the reading, Alonzo invited people to speak. Alma stood up first. She talked about a loaf of bread I ruined in 1999 and how I ate the burnt slice so no one else had to. People laughed with their mouths closed. Laughter in rooms like that always has a lid on it. My neighbor, Mr. Kane, spoke about the time I helped him fix a fence, even though my own gate was sagging. 5 minutes later, a woman I barely recognized stood and said I'd changed her tire in a parking lot in August. I didn't remember it. That's the thing about small kindnesses. Your hands forget their own work. Then Carla rose. She touched the edge of the photo frame, looked at the room with wet eyes, and started to talk about how responsibility would fall now. We all know Thomas wasn't the best with money, she said in a soft, careful tone. We will need to ensure the house is handled with care. She let the word we hang like a thread. Nora's chin tilted a degree. Alonzo didn't blink. I sat very still and listened to the sound of bad timing echo across carpet. David cleared his throat and said he would step up during this transition. He used the word equitable. He used the phrase fair market value. He used my living room vocabulary in a room where I wasn't supposed to hear it. Erin didn't speak then. She held her cup with both hands and stared at the photo. Her mouth moved. I wish I could have read it. Later, I would ask her what she said to herself, and she would answer, "I said your name." When the formal part ended, the room split into little islands that drifted toward the snack table and back. A cousin took a picture of the framed photo when she thought no one was looking. Joe asked a quiet question to Nora, and I watched her answer with the patience of someone who has seen that question come out of 100 mouths in 100 rooms. Alma sat with Erin and squeezed her knee, and I felt that squeeze in my own hand. Alonzo had set a second camera near the hallway that led to the coats. I hadn't asked for it. He added it because he knows how people behave when they think the room has turned its head. It faced the wall, not the hooks, so all you saw were feet and the bottom of a sleeve. It was enough. I saw Carla's feet pause near the office door. I saw Joe's shoes pivot and pivot again. I saw David's footsteps hesitate at the spot where the house plan hangs in a frame, the one with pencil marks from the day I measured the kitchen for cabinets. The camera recorded nothing illegal. It recorded something more useful, the rhythm of intent. At the end, Alonzo thanked everyone again and collected the cups, so no one would try to take theirs as a souvenir. People left in pairs and threes. Aaron hugged Alma for a long time. David hugged no one, then realized the room was watching and hugged someone for show. Carla patted Nora's arm like they were old friends. Joe asked if there were any items that needed handling. Nora's smile could have cut a rope. When the last person left, Alonzo walked back to the side room and drew the curtain back. He didn't say anything at first. He let me breathe. Then he placed a small square of paper on the table, an attendance list with notes. He'd marked who spoke, who stayed, who asked the wrong questions. Not with judgments, with facts. "You all right?" he asked. "I am," I said, and the words felt new. He didn't ask if I wanted to jump out and surprise them in the parking lot. That's a TV urge, not a life urge. He asked if I wanted a glass of water. I did. He poured one and waited while I drank it. Then he handed me a thumb drive with the footage and said, "Do you want me to store a copy in the office safe for 30 days? "Yes," I said. "Please." On the drive home, I played the radio low and the road high. The sky had that washed-out color it gets after a long day of people holding their breath. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked older than I felt, and younger than they wanted me to be. It made me laugh out loud in the car like a man who has finally found the joke. The days after the memorial were the loudest days my walls had heard in years. People called and said the same two words in different orders. So, arrangements? Next steps? Estate matters? House plan? I didn't answer most of them. Nora did. She has a way of saying no that feels like a door closing softly on well-oiled hinges. David came to the house and stood on the porch like a neighbor. He kept his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the trim. "I think we should list," he said without preamble. "List what?" I asked. "The house," he said, letting surprise show like a tactic. "Oh," I said, looking at the maple tree. "Whose house?" He pulled his face into a shape he thought looked kind. "Come on, Dad. You know what I mean." "What you mean?" I said. "Keeps changing." He looked at the new locks and did the math. "You changed the keys." "I changed my mind," I said. "You're making this harder," he said. "I'm making it real," I said. Erin called that night and asked if I was sleeping. I told her I was trying. She asked if she could come by in the morning and sit on the porch with me like she used to before school when she was nervous about a test and needed the air to tell her the answers were still in her head. She came by at 8, sharp with coffee. We sat in silence for a while. When she spoke, she didn't waste sound. "They made me feel like I was a vault," she said, "like my eyes were supposed to turn into dials." "You don't have to be a lock for anyone," I said. "I kept counting the chairs," she said, and almost smiled. I didn't like myself for it. "Want to know something?" I said. "I counted them too, to remember who sat where, to keep the room in my head, not on a list." She squeezed my hand. "I didn't say anything the other day because I didn't trust my mouth," she said. "I didn't want to throw any more sharp things into the room. But I'm here now." "Being here," I said, "is the only thing that ever mattered." Nora called with updates. The trust documents were filed and solid. The clause about harassment had already been tested by 2 late-night calls from a number that blocked its own name. She sent a letter to everyone who had attended the memorial. The letter didn't gloat. It didn't reveal. It said, "Arrangements are being handled according to prior instructions. You will be contacted if you are named for any specific bequests. Please refrain from inquiries and allow space for the family." She signed it with her name and the weight of her firm. The room that had been buzzing with informal authority went quiet like a radio turned off mid-song. In the middle of all that quiet, small, satisfying moments bloomed. Joe stopped by my garage when he thought I wasn't home. He tried the side door and found it wouldn't budge because I had finally fixed the frame. He stood there, shifting his weight, looking up and down the alley like a man waiting for a sign. I flipped on the light inside and opened the door. He jumped, then smiled. "Oh, hey, Uncle Tom, just checking the weatherproofing on this door. Looks good." "Thanks for checking my house," I said. "I'm the one who lives here." He backed away with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. I watched him leave and felt nothing but relief. Carla texted Aaron a long message about, quote, family unity and division being so ugly. She included a story about a cousin somewhere who had to sell their house because people didn't communicate. Aaron forwarded it to me with a single word. Thoughts? I replied, our unity isn't for sale. The detective I'd spoken to months ago, when I put a quiet note on record that I felt pressure from family about property, called to check in. You still good? No threats? He asked. Only the soft kind, I said. Soft gets sharp, he said. Call if it does. It didn't, not then. Things got petty. David dropped hints to mutual friends about how, sadly complicated, everything had become. Carla suggested a family meeting at her house, the kind with platters of things you didn't ask for and a chair position so you sit lower than whoever is leading. I declined. I hosted Aaron and Alma instead, and made soup that tasted like the kind of kitchen where people keep their voices kind. We ate, and we didn't plan anything. We let the simple act of spoons moving through bowls be enough. At night, I sat at the table and read the letters I had written, even the one to myself. Being a man is sometimes just remembering the quiet sentence you wrote when the house wasn't noisy. You are not a bank. You are a man. Days turned into a hallway that led back to Nora's office. She looked at the calendar and then at me. If you still want the lesson, she said, the next step is ready. I want it, I said, and I didn't mean revenge. I meant clarity, the kind that lets you sleep without checking the door twice. She took out a sealed envelope I had signed weeks before. On the front, I had written simple instructions. She nodded to Alonzo, who had joined us to make sure the tone stayed right. We host one more quiet gathering, he said. We air one more set of words. Then the paperwork does what it was built to do. I nodded. Aaron would be there. Alma would be there. The ones who came to count would come again, because counting is a habit. They would sit, and they would listen to the truth read aloud in the calm voice of a lawyer who never raises her tone for people who confuse volume with power. And this time, there would be one more presence in the room they wouldn't expect. I went home and cleaned my house the way you do before a storm, even if you're not leaving. I dusted the frames, wiped the glass, tightened the hinge on the bedroom closet that always sits a little wrong. I sharpened 2 pencils and set them beside a blank pad because sometimes the act of being ready is the only umbrella you get. I slept. Morning came like a hand on my shoulder. I drank coffee on the porch while the sun took attendance of the roofs on my street. A bird scolded a squirrel on the fence. The world did what it always does when you're about to make a decision that will change how your name sounds in other people's mouths. It kept going. I smiled into my cup and whispered to the air, I'm going too. The hour approached. I put on a suit that didn't try too hard. I tucked my wallet note into the inside pocket because I like to carry myself with myself when rooms get heavy. On the way out, I touched the new locks one by one, not to check them, but to thank them for doing their job. Alonzo met me at the side entrance, the one staff uses when they need to walk in and out of difficult rooms without picking up the grief like a coat. He led me to the same side space as before, but this time the curtain was thinner. The camera wasn't the only thing between me and the room. There was air I could step through if I chose. Remember, he said gently, no surprises, we keep dignity. I know, I said, the surprise isn't mine. It's theirs. People arrived. The same clusters, the same drift toward the front. David at the edge of the aisle, looking like he owned the concept of responsibility. Carla with a face trained for sympathy. Joe with that glimmer that comes from wanting a story to tell. Aaron with a set jaw and eyes that had cried at some point earlier, and chosen not to do it again today. Alma with a hand on Aaron's back, Mr. Kane with a hat in his hands. Harry. Nora stood and opened the envelope. The paper inside made a sound like honesty. She cleared her throat and said, He asked me to read this part last. I could have stepped out then. I could have walked to the front and watched their faces make the shapes I knew they'd make. But the lesson wasn't the jump. The lesson was the wait. So I stood behind the curtain, breathing, while the room took the first clean breath it had taken in months. and then the words began. David shifted in his seat as Nora unfolded the second letter. The room, already tense, seemed to shrink around the sound of paper. Erin leaned forward, her hands clasped tight on her lap, while Carla tilted her head with an expression rehearsed to look compassionate. Joe's foot tapped like a drummer waiting for his cue. Nora read in that even, unshakable voice of hers. Thomas wanted you to understand something before decisions are made. He believed that family is built on actions, not titles. And he wrote in his own hand, "If you gathered here because you loved me, thank you. If you gathered here because you loved what I owned, I know the difference, and so will the world." The words landed like stones tossed into a pond. Ripples spread fast. David's jaw tightened. He gave a nervous laugh that made two cousins glance away. Carla shifted in her seat, crossing and uncrossing her arms, as if she could fold herself out of the spotlight. Joe stopped tapping, froze, then darted his eyes to the exit before deciding it was safer to stay seated. I watched from behind the curtain, close enough to hear the creak of chairs as they moved, but still hidden, letting their own reactions play louder than any accusation I could have spoken. This was why I hadn't interrupted before. Truth reveals itself best in silence. Nora continued, "There is one more instruction. He asked me to state clearly that the trust controlling his assets is active. It contains provisions against harassment, coercion, or attempts to divide what is not yet yours. Any violation will result in removal from consideration. That decision is final." The room went still. Erin turned her head slowly toward David. She didn't need to say anything. Her eyes asked the question that had been waiting for weeks. "Have you been planning more than you admit?" David's face flushed red. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, too loud for a whisper but too quiet for confidence. "He's gone, and now we have to deal with all this paperwork. Fair market value, equitable distribution, that's what matters." Alma stood then. She had been quiet the entire time, her hands folded neatly on her lap. She turned to the room, her voice calm but sharper than anyone expected. "You talk about value as if it fits into a box. You talk about equity like it's owed to you. What was owed to you was kindness, and Thomas gave you that for years. What you did with it, that's your value." Carla bristled. "We're just being realistic, Alma. Houses, accounts, furniture, somebody has to think practically." Nora closed the folder and set it on the table. "Practicality is already arranged. You're not here to plan. You're here to listen." I felt my pulse steady in my chest. This was it. I could stay behind the curtain and let Nora's words finish the work. Or I could step through and let them see the man they had already buried in their minds. My hand pressed against the fabric. It felt heavy, like every accusation and every whispered count had been stitched into it. The moment stretched, and in that stretch I heard their greed echo again. Every casual question, every sideways glance, every laugh about timelines and listings. They had made me invisible in my own house. Now they would see me again. I pulled the curtain aside. Gasps filled the room. David's chair scraped back, nearly tipping. Carla clutched her chest like she'd seen a ghost. Joe's mouth dropped open, his foot tapping again, but this time out of sheer panic. Erin's eyes filled, not with fear, but with relief so sharp it cut right through me. I walked slowly to the front. Not a rush, not a performance. Just steps that belonged to me. I stood by the framed photo of myself, looked at it, then at them. "Funny," I said softly, "seeing a picture of yourself while people talk like you're not in the room." The silence was absolute. No one coughed, no one shuffled. "I didn't fake a death," I said. "I staged a mirror, and what I saw in it, I'll never forget. Neither will you." David stammered first. "You? This is insane. You humiliated us." "No," I interrupted, my voice even. "You humiliated yourselves. You couldn't wait. You couldn't hold a thought of me without turning it into a number. You counted before the clock even ticked." Carla tried to recover. "We just wanted to make sure things were handled properly." "Handled properly," I said. "You mean handled conveniently. Convenient for you. Convenient for your pockets. Convenient for the story you tell yourselves at night." I turned then, not to David or Carla, but to Aaron. You remembered me. Not my house, not my tools. Me. And that is why the papers are already signed, the trust already sealed. This house, this life. It belongs with the person who didn't treat me like a ledger. Erin covered her mouth with her hand, tears sliding down her cheeks. The others? Their faces twisted, half in shock, half in rage. David started to speak again, but Nora stood, folder in hand, and cut him off. It's done. Legally. Permanently. You are entitled to nothing more than the memory of what you said in this room. And that memory will follow you far longer than any inheritance. I looked at them one last time, then said, You buried me too soon. Now you live with what you uncovered. The room broke. Carla grabbed her purse and stormed out, muttering under her breath. Joe followed, his shoes squeaking on the floor. David lingered, fists tight, then turned and left without a word. Erin stayed. She stayed like she always did when she was a girl, waiting for the end of the story. And in that room, with her hand in mine, I felt more alive than I had in years. David left with his fists tight, and Carla stormed out, but that wasn't the end, not even close. The room still carried their echoes, like smoke after a fire. Erin sat with me, her hand trembling in mine, and I knew this moment wasn't just about dividing property. It was about dividing truth from lies, loyalty from greed. In the days after, the fallout spread like ripples across a pond. David tried damage control. He called friends, cousins, anyone who would listen, and told them I had tricked the family. He spun the story as if I had staged a cruel prank instead of defending myself. Carla leaned into her poor me persona, claiming I had embarrassed her publicly, that she only ever wanted to help handle things properly. Joe? He vanished for a while, ducking calls, then surfaced with rumors that he was going to sue. But here's the thing about lies. They need fuel. And I had cut off their supply. Nora had already filed everything, the trust was sealed, the legal doors closed. They could huff and puff, but they had no house left to blow down. That didn't stop them from trying. David came to my door one evening. He didn't knock at first, he just stood there, a shadow in the porch light. When I opened the door, he forced a smile. Dad, we should talk. This isn't you. You've always been about family. Family, I said. Yes. That's why this hurts so much. You can still change it, he said quickly. The trust, the papers. It's not set in stone, right? I mean, what's a signature? You can always sign again. I looked at him, really looked. This was the boy who once asked me to help glue a broken toy back together. The one who cried when his dog ran away. And now he was standing on my porch trying to bargain away my dignity like it was an extra chair in the garage. It is set in stone, I said, because it's set in me. And I won't carve myself hollow to make space for greed. His face tightened. He muttered something under his breath and walked away, his footsteps hard on the pavement. Carla tried a different angle. She sent Erin a long message, dripping with sugary guilt. Your father isn't well. He's not thinking clearly. We should sit down together, you and me, and figure out how to help him. I'm worried about him. I'm worried about all of us. Erin showed me the message. She asked, Do you want me to answer? No, I said. Silence is the only answer greed understands. But silence wasn't enough for Joe. He showed up with a manila folder full of nonsense, printouts from websites, half-baked legal arguments, some highlighted sentences he clearly didn't understand. He tried to wave it at me like it was a sword. This says you can't just cut people out like that, he snapped. That's not a law, I said, glancing at the pages. That's a blog. He flushed red, stammered, and stuffed the papers back in his folder. He tried to slam the door behind him, but my new locks were stronger than his temper. And still, the fallout spread wider. They whispered to anyone who would listen, trying to paint me as the villain. But here's the truth. Greed doesn't whisper well. It screams, it twists, it shows its teeth. And people saw it. Friends who had known us for years stopped calling them. Neighbors stopped waving. One by one, The doors they tried to push open stayed closed. Meanwhile, Erin stayed. She came by in the mornings, brought coffee, sat with me on the porch while the world spun. She didn't ask for the house. She didn't ask for the money. She asked for nothing but time, and that's the only inheritance that ever mattered. Weeks later, Nora called me into her office. "Thomas, they've filed nothing. No claims, no suits. They've missed deadlines. All that noise? It was just noise." I leaned back in the chair, let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "So, it's over?" "It's over," she said. "Legally. Emotionally, that's up to you." I walked out of her office into the evening light, the sky painted gold, and I realized the final twist wasn't just that I had faked my farewell. It was that they had written their own ending long before I stepped behind that curtain. They thought they could strip me of my dignity, reduce me to assets on a page. Instead, they stripped themselves bare, showed everyone who they really were. And in the end, they lost everything, not because I tricked them, but because they buried me too soon. I didn't lose my house. I didn't lose my peace. I didn't lose myself. I gained the only thing worth keeping. The knowledge that my worth isn't measured in what I own, but in who stands with me when the counting stops. And when Erin held my hand that night and said, "Dad, I'm proud of you," I knew the lesson had been worth every second. David's anger didn't die quietly. A week after our confrontation, I learned he had been visiting neighbors, spinning a story where I was losing my mind, that Erin and Nora were manipulating me. Carla joined in, with her voice dripping sympathy, whispering in church pews that poor Thomas isn't himself anymore. But lies have a way of eating their own tail, because while they whispered, I had already pulled one more string they didn't know about. Months earlier, before this plan had even reached its sharpest edge, I'd given Alonzo permission to record both memorial gatherings in full, with clear audio and multiple angles. Those recordings weren't for gossip, they were for protection. But the twist? Nora had quietly filed them with the court as supplementary evidence alongside the trust, which meant, on record, there wasn't just legal paperwork. There was proof. Their words, their greed, their careless hunger spoken out loud in front of witnesses. When David tried to argue that I had been coerced, Nora let the footage play in front of the judge. David's own voice filled the chamber. Fair market value, equitable distribution, timelines. Carla's voice followed. We all know Thomas wasn't the best with money. We'll need to handle the house with care. Joe's bright-eyed questions about any items needing handling sealed it. The judge leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said, "Mr. Carter," he was speaking to me, "your family has done more to prove your case than any affidavit could. Their greed testifies against them." From that moment, they lost any leverage they thought they had. Not only were they cut out of the trust, but the court also awarded me additional protections. Any further harassment, any attempt to contest, would carry penalties, financial and criminal. Word spread fast. Friends stopped listening to their sob stories. Neighbors they had poisoned against me began to see the truth. People who once nodded politely at them in town turned their heads away. David's reputation at work cracked. Carla's social circle shrank. Joe, the nephew who thought he'd inherit tools he never earned, found doors closed where once they had been open. But the true satisfaction didn't come from their downfall. It came from what I did next. I took the footage, the same videos they never thought would see daylight, and gave permission for one clip to air during a local community segment. Not the whole recording, not a public shaming, just a minute of David and Carla discussing my possessions while a photo of me stood framed in the corner. The supposed farewell. The anchor introduced it gently. This story reminds us of what greed does to families. I didn't need to say a word. The community watched, and judgment came on its own. From that day forward, I could walk into town square, into church, into the hardware store, and people saw me not as a man tricked by his age, but as a man who had exposed what others tried to hide. Erin walked with me, her head high, and more than once I saw the way her eyes shone, not with shame, but with pride. The final twist wasn't just that they were cut out of my will, it wasn't even that their reputations collapsed. The final twist was this. They had buried me too soon, and when I rose, it was with more strength than they ever expected. They lost my house, my money, my trust, my respect, and in the process, they lost themselves. I hadn't just faked a funeral, I had forced them to attend their own. And when I locked the door of my home that night with Aaron beside me, I felt the silence at last. Not the silence of being erased, but the silence of peace. David's version of events didn't last long in town, because lies don't like daylight. He tried them anyway. He stood outside the hardware store with his coffee and told anyone within 5 feet that I was losing it, that Aaron had gotten to me, that some lawyer was profiting off a confused old man. He even tried that line on Pete, who has sold me hinges and sandpaper for 30 years. Pete listened, wiped the counter like he was polishing the story right off it, and then asked, "You mean the lawyer who read the letter you wrote? The one you signed? The one we all heard?" David blinked. His words hit a wall and fell in front of his shoes. Carla's version took the long way around. She sat 3 pews from the front on Sundays and talked in the parking lot after service like sympathy was a badge you could pin on yourself. "It's just so sad," she told anyone who would meet her eyes. "Thomas has changed. We're trying to help him manage what he can't." She'd lower her voice for that last part, like she was protecting me. The pastor finally pulled her aside. He walked her to the little maple tree near the ramp, where kids race after donuts, and told her as gently as a man can tell someone that gossip isn't ministry. She left with a smile too tight for her face and didn't come back for a while. Joe tried to be loud online. He posted about elder abuse and legal trickery, tagged local groups, and hinted I had been brainwashed by a woman who wanted my property. He meant Nora, but he didn't have the spine to write her name. The post sat there for an hour before the first comment appeared. It was from one of the hikers who pulled me up on the mountain months earlier. "I don't know this family," the comment said, but that man was fully alert when he climbed. He was steady. He was kind. He thanked us like we'd helped rebuild the world. If this is about money, maybe ask where your heart went. The thread died. Joe took the post down. He left up a picture of his dinner with a caption about how people shouldn't be fake. I didn't clap for any of that. Pride looks ugly with hands. I did small chores. I patched the porch step. I oiled the window that used to squeal when you opened it too fast. I took the old fence cap down to the shed and sanded the rust off, set it in the sun, and watched it warm back to itself. Alma came by with strawberries and sat on my stoop like we were kids who'd cut class. Erin dropped in after work and leaned her head on my shoulder for 5 quiet minutes at a time. The house learned the new rhythm of just us. A week later, the local paper called. Not a tabloid voice. Just Nora, the reporter who writes about bake sales and scholarship winners, and the man who plants tulips outside the library every spring. She said she'd heard there was a story about dignity and asked if I wanted to say anything on the record. "I won't do scandal," she said. "I'll do kindness. I'll do caution. I'll do what greed does to a family so someone else can avoid it." I told her she could film 1 minute of the memorial, the moment where David said equitable distribution while my photo sat on a table. I wasn't trying to drag him. I wanted the town to see how words sound when they're spoken next to a face you claim to love. The segment played at the end of a Friday newscast. It led with a shot of the memorial room, not the guests, not their shoes, not the coat hooks, just the photo, the lamp, the simple table. The voiceover was Nora's steady tone. Sometimes the loudest lessons are learned in quiet rooms. This one reminded us that a life is more than its furniture. She cut to the clip of David's voice saying fair market value, then cut away before his face appeared. She didn't need to show the person to show the point. I went to the grocery the next morning and 3 people I barely knew stopped me to squeeze my arm and say, "Good for you." One old man who once snapped at me for parking crooked put a hand to his heart and said, "I wish I had your courage 10 years ago." The cashier, a kid with a name tag that said June, asked me if I needed help carrying anything. I said no. She bagged the bread like it was breakable. I walked out feeling like I'd been seen without being stared at. David called that evening. He went straight to heat. "How could you air that? You made me look bad." "I didn't make you," I said. "You want to ruin me?" he asked. "I want you to hear yourself," I said. "You've been talking for months." He went very quiet, and then asked for money. He didn't call it that. He called it a bridge, and a loan, and a temporary situation at work, because some people don't understand family dynamics. I told him no, that I wouldn't buy him out of a hole he dug with a spade I saw him carry. He hung up without a goodbye. I set the phone on the counter and looked at the note in my wallet. "You are not a bank. You are a man." I pressed my thumb on the words until the paper bent. 2 days later, he showed up at my porch again, hands open as if he'd arrived to receive something. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked for a second chance at the will, like the will was a concert you could attend if you found a ticket stub in a coat you haven't worn in a while. "You made a point," he said, smiling a smile that only touched the bottom half of his face. "You won. Let's move on now. Make it right." "It is right," I said. "You think cutting your son out is right?" His voice rose, and a neighbor's blinds twitched. He lowered his tone, tried brisk kindness instead. "Okay, you're upset. I get it. How about we agree the house sells? We split after costs. Aaron gets something extra for being the favorite, and we all go to dinner like normal people." "I am a normal person," I said. "I eat dinner every night. I water the plants. I sleep. You can do those things without my house on your plate." He laughed once, a sound without joy. "You're going to regret this." "I regret waiting as long as I did to say no," I said. He took a step closer. I took one back so he'd have to choose between following me into my home and leaving like a guest. The porch light clicked on because the sensor reads motion and stress the same. He chose to leave because brave men don't stand in the glow when they don't own the switch. Nora called the next morning. "David's filed a petition," she said, "claiming undue influence and diminished capacity. He's implying you were manipulated." "By who?" I asked. I knew the answer. "By me," she said. "By Aaron. By the idea of being respected." Her laugh didn't quite make it out of her chest. "We'll handle it. It's sloppy. And we have everything. Dates, medical notes, footage, signed letters, witnesses." "He wants a fight," I said. "He wants an audience," she corrected. "We'll give the judge a record." The hearing wasn't a spectacle. The courtroom was small. The ceiling was low enough to make voices gentler than they planned to be. David sat at one table with a lawyer who talked with his hands. Carla sat behind him with a face like she'd been chosen for an unpleasant task, only she knew how to bear. Joe leaned against the wall and tried to catch the eye of whoever walked in because attention is the only currency he knows how to spend. Our side was quiet. Nora kept her paperwork in a neat stack and didn't bother with a slideshow. Alma sat behind me in a sweater she'd worn every fall since the year we learned our knees make different noises in cold weather. Aaron took my hand under the table and squeezed once before letting go to take notes in a little book, like she was in a class that taught people how not to break. David's attorney began with big words about duty and suspicion and the possibility of confusion. He said my staged farewell was an act of manipulation, that I had been pushed into it by people with interests. He tried to make interests sound like a slur. Nora stood and used small words. "Thomas is here," she said. "He can answer your questions. He wrote the letters you heard. He built the trust before any gathering took place. He spoke with me, with his doctor, with his banker, with his friend, privately and calmly. He can list the clauses in the trust and tell you which one we added last because he wanted a boundary spelled out. The judge asked me to speak. I told him the truth without decoration. I told him about January and the room tilting. I told him about the tape measure in my dining room and the notebook with house printed in block letters. I told him about voice and tone and how numbers started to replace names. I told him about a memorial that asked people to speak about a man, not the things he put on a shelf. I told him what they chose. "We have footage," Nora added, "and we're submitting it not to embarrass anyone, but because it is proof of context." She handed the flash drive over, like it was a cup filled too high. The judge watched the section where David used phrases better suited to real estate listings than memories. He paused on Carla's soft insistence that I wasn't the best with money. He watched Joe bounce on his heels like a boy at a store window. He didn't look at me while the words played. He watched the faces of the people who'd said them. When the video stopped, the silence didn't. David's attorney tried to recover. He suggested I had a long history of impulsive decisions. He asked if I'd ever done anything that could be considered rash. Nora nodded, as if indulging a child. He once bought a broken snowblower and rebuilt it for fun, she said. Is that the example you'd like on the record? The judge smothered a smile. He turned to David. Do you have anything to add? He asked. David leaned into his microphone and said, My father is being unkind. Kindness isn't a legal standard, the judge said. Capacity is. So is coercion. So is harassment. He looked down at the paper in front of him, then back up. Mr. Carter, your father is lucid, consistent, and prepared. Your petition is denied. Nora didn't raise her eyebrows or her voice. She simply said, Your Honor, we also filed a request for costs and for the enforcement of a clause in the trust that penalizes harassment. We reserve the right to seek damages if our client was forced into unnecessary proceedings. David's attorney made a noise like a cough that wanted to be a shout. This is punitive. It's protective, Nora said. The judge didn't take long. He read the clause. He read the dates. He looked at the exhibit list and tapped the line that said, Second Memorial. You were warned, he said to David. Sometimes the only way to teach a boundary is to put a price on crossing it. Petition denied. Costs awarded. The trust's harassment provision is enforceable. You will pay the fees associated with this action within 30 days. He looked toward our table. If the fees are not paid, counsel may return with a motion for sanctions. Carla whispered to David with her hand half covering her mouth like we were children who still believed in magic. Joe stared at the clock like time was a person who could rescue him. Outside the courthouse, the sky had that washed, brand-new look it sometimes gets on days when you do something hard and keep your shoulders from climbing up to your ears. Erin hugged me with 2 arms like she was bracing both of us. Alma handed me a peppermint and told me to put it in my mouth so I wouldn't grind my teeth. Nora shook my hand and said, We're not finished, but we are through. The next month moved the way good months do, without announcement. Erin came by with her kids and the house practiced being loud with happy again. They ran in the yard and argued over who got the red cup and discovered a drawer full of rubber bands because I buy them in bags and forget where I put them. I replaced the screen on the back door and showed my granddaughter how to press the spline into the groove without slipping. She did it like a professional and beamed like she'd made a window. Carla paid her portion of the fees late and with a note about injustices. David paid his on day 29 with a check that vibrated on the counter like it wanted to run. Joe never paid anything because you can't pay a cost you didn't incur by being brave enough to put your name on a petition. But the town paid him in a different currency. No more borrowed ladders, no more, I'll get you next time. No more handshakes held for 1 second too long while he tried to see if you had something he could turn into his. A small station 2 counties over picked up Nora's piece and aired it as part of a series on what families owe each other. They didn't mention names. They mentioned lessons. They used 5 seconds of my memorial. The quiet moment where Alma stood and talked about burnt bread and how someone ate the worst slice so no one else had to. That 5 seconds did more for my heart than any legal win. It reminded me that the best stories aren't about villains. They're about the people who held the line without shouting. One afternoon, Erin asked if we could go to the storage unit where I'd kept her mother's boxes since we moved out of the old apartment. We rolled the door up and the smell of cardboard and time kissed our faces. She opened one box and pulled out a small tin with a red lid. Inside were letters, folded into triangles like my wife used to fold notes for school lunches. Erin unfolded one and read out loud. It was dated a month after she turned 8. If your dad ever forgets how to rest, remind him he is more than his work, it said. If you ever feel people want from you more than they love you, come home. Erin's voice broke on home. We stood in the aisle with our hands on the tin and let the moment do what it needed to do. We took the letters back to the house and put them in the top drawer of the desk where the cat naps when the sun hits the wood. The next court date wasn't dramatic. It was administrative, the kind where signatures get stacked and file stamps thump like slow applause. Nora filed a notice for completion of costs. The judge signed. Then Nora did something I didn't expect. She turned to David's attorney and said, "We're willing to accept an arrangement if your client wants to avoid further embarrassment. He can write a letter acknowledging harassment and the attempt to pressure. He can agree not to contact my client directly again. In exchange, we won't seek additional sanctions unless he violates the order." David's attorney looked at him. David stared at the table. Carla whispered. Joe checked his phone. Finally, David said, "Fine." His voice sounded like a board bending before it breaks. He signed the letter. He put down the pen like it had taken a piece of him with it. Maybe it had. That might sound like the big end. It wasn't. The end came the way good endings do. Clean, surprising, and exactly what the story had quietly promised all along. Nora invited us to her office one last time. Erin sat to my left. Alma took the chair in the corner and knitted something that was more knot than sweater because she likes to keep her hands busy when rooms get serious. Nora set a new folder on the table and slid it toward me. "You asked for a lesson," she said. "You got one. You asked for peace. You're building it. There's one more piece we can add, if you want to lock that piece in, for the people who come after you." She explained a simple change to the trust. Nothing anyone would read about in a magazine. Nothing anyone would make a podcast out of. Just this: when I'm gone for real, the house won't be sold. It will pass to Erin with a life right, and the remainder will pass to a small community fund run through the memorial home. The fund will pay for modest repairs in old neighbors' houses every winter, hinges, steps, windows that don't close because the frame swelled with a storm. It will be called the Quiet Hands Fund because names matter and we don't always need loud ones. "And the seed money for the fund," Nora said, "comes from the fees your relatives just paid." I sat very still. I felt the small click of something sliding into place I hadn't realized was loose. Erin put her hand over her mouth and laughed through tears. Alma let her knitting fall into her lap and said, "That's a good name." We signed. We set the pen down. Then the last twist arrived like a note under a door. Nora looked at me and said, "One more thing. Their letter of acknowledgement? We can file it with the trust documents if you want it to live where your boundaries live. Or we can keep it separate." "File it," I said. "It belongs with the lines it crossed." On the walk home, Erin asked if she could carry the folder. She held it against her chest like a book she'd waited a long time to borrow. We didn't talk much. We didn't have to. The street looked like itself again. The maple tree near the corner had started to go gold at the tips. The cat in the window flicked an ear and watched us like she'd been hired to stand guard. That evening, David sent one last message. It had no greeting and no sign-off. "I hope you're happy," it said. I didn't write back. Happiness is a small word. I was something larger. Steady. I turned my porch light off early and sat in the soft dark, listening to the house breathe. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe and join Taste of Revenge family, and share your impressions of the story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on one of the boxes on the right. Thank you for watching to the end.